Hey folks, this is Bob on the geopolitical day. It's about Paris and France. It's been headline news for the longest time. Prime Minister going, his personal relationship with Macron. Let's face it, there is a strategic importance of France, which is at a high level. Can that strategic relationship ever get to the level of really closeness? Is difficult because of the lack of, I mean, we keep talking about this diaspora in France. There's very little diaspora. And you think about the French, whether India can really culturally kind of join at the hip like the United States, difficult to say, or probably difficult to achieve, because the key things are not there. Indian students are not going there. That's the big thing. Now, what brought the United States to the forefront is because of the intelligent diaspora in the United States. But it is an important relationship. And you know that France, for example, it brings with it a lot of heft, right? And the heft is because you look at it this way, right? That it was a big colonial power, right? Starting from the times of Napoleon, right? You had, where all do you see France, right? France was in the Maghreb, whether it's Libya, Algeria, Morocco, right? Or Tunisia. And Africa was kind of divided between the Anglo and the Franco, right? Then you came down, and the big part is reunion. Then how many of us know, how many of you know that if you look at a map of the Middle East, right, you see how clearly it's divided and you wonder how that happened with all these tribes. It was done by a combination of a Britisher and a French, Sykes and Picot. So both of the French were involved there too. Then you come down to India, then you have Pondicherry, right? There again it was France versus the UK, right? Then you get to Southeast Asia, hey, the Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all French, right? You go as far up as going to Latin America, you have French Guiana, right? Then Canada, who can forget Canada? The French are still there, right? In Montreal, right? So French are critical, but the security, as Jaffarlo writes, tied by security. Military deals dominate Indo-French relationship. Other partnerships show potential, but in my view, like Russia, because of this language issue and cultural issue, they're not going to go beyond that, because still you have this cross flow of people and students. It's not going to happen. So he says, unlike Indo-German relationship, which are dominated by trade-related matters with key roles for private companies, the ties between India and France are dominated by security objectives in which non-state actors are marginal players. Until that happens, you really can't take a relationship very far. Official narratives do emphasize structural affinities such as democratic-like mindedness, but what matters more are common security-related interests. First, both countries are keen to balance China in the Indian Ocean. And here it's important, right? India and France could also conceive other forms of minilateralism and foster multilateralism in the Indo-Pacific. France is a part of 3 regional networks: the Indian Ocean Commission since 1986, the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium since its creation in 2008, and the Indian Ocean Rim Association created in 1995 since 2020. At the same trilateral forums are also being forged. The France-India-Australia dialogue, for instance, it was interrupted for a couple of years after the making of AUKUS. Another mini-lateral has been forged between France, India and UAE, and that the only place where Raphael comes into play is the UAE. Then you have this, what Nirupam Subramaniam writes, the French connection. France is India's oldest strategic partner, and the relationship has almost no friction points. Both countries value the strategic autonomy, independent foreign policies, and seek a multipolar world. Now, this is a problem. French, since de Gaulle, has tried to do that, right? Never achieved it. Went out of NATO in 1966, had to come back with its tail between its legs, right? Macron wants to be the tough guy. Europe as a third superpower, never happened, right? Russia on the backside, again scampering to the United States. So French have always had it as a big bomb. But hey, the French were saved by the Americans during World War II. Otherwise, they would have been hammered by the Nazis, right? So he says he warned the Europe's security dependence on the US and the extraordinarity of the dollar could turn European states into vassals. If the US-China confrontation escalated, he also pushed the idea of Europe as a third superpower with France in the lead. This is his problem. France in the lead. Where is France going to lead anything, right? Between France and Germany, Germany is way ahead of France, right? Look at the kind of money it put in to defense after Russia attacked Ukraine, right? However, he cautioned against assuming the France's view on China were the same as India's. France has a different relationship with China, and India should appreciate that, right? We should appreciate that, right? Strategic autonomy bid binds India and France. That's the only real thing. And I'm going to cover this, the transfer of technology, in another thing. There is never going to be transfer of technology from France, just like there wasn't from the USSR. And there are 2-3 key reasons for that, which I'll bring up in a later. That requires full 14 minutes. A common understanding of the concept of strategic autonomy has been central to the two states' foreign policy since the late 40s. In French context, former President Charles de Gaulle wanted more autonomy vis-a-vis the US. One direct application of this was the decision by France to leave NATO military command structure in 66. Though it remained a member of the alliance, it came right back. A shared historical struggle to maintain strategic autonomy in a complex geopolitical landscape has helped both powers develop a degree of trust and pragmatic partnership. Now, this is the problem. This strategic autonomy is an overblown concept, I think. I mean, India and China has used that to its extreme when it kind of puts India, every time India wants to get close to the US, it comes strategic autonomy, strategic autonomy. It works against them. And this is why France is important, right? PM ties in Indo-Pacific to ensure navigation freedom. Series of pacts sealed as Modi and Macron hold talks in Paris outline bold, ambitious goals. UPI is a big thing, right? Modi, Macron talk Rafale subs, be it submarine or Indian naval ships. Together we want to fulfill not just our requirements, but also requirements of third nations. That's not really going to happen. This is the problem. France doesn't have a third country that they can sell any of their defense equipment. However, on this front, critical technology for quantum computing, rare earths, and finance and green is where a big place. But like I said, after summit, no mention of Rafale deal in papers because it is creating a huge stink both in France and in India. India-France ties strong. Look forward to roadmap for next 25 years. Ties between India, France, unbreakable. Modi tells diaspora. There really is no diaspora. And the funny thing is, Modi never shows up except in a negative way in international newspapers. La Mode had a terrible op-ed on him. Terrible. Called him the butcher of Gujarat. How bad is that? And the reason is because when he goes to these countries, he only is focusing on the diaspora, not the intelligentsia of those countries. Obviously, there's always going to be negative press. So while he was doing that, European Parliament calls for end to Manipur violence, urges protection of minorities. And next Tango in Paris, as Raj Mandala, right? The 25th anniversary of Indo-French strategic partnership is a good moment for Delhi to re-engage with European and Eurasian security. He says in Paris this week, PM Modi has several reasons to take a fresh look at European security and prospects of the renewing India's role for one. Modi will arrive in Paris just after the conclusion of the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, which is expected to announce some significant decisions on Ukraine and European security. 2. The NATO summit will also reveal deep differences within Europe and across the Atlantic on how to end the war in Ukraine and build peace with Russia. 3. What happens in Europe does not stay in Europe. The outcome of the war in Ukraine will have profound consequences for Asian security. 4. The PM would undoubtedly want to understand better Macron's position on China. It's not going to change. 5. At the top of Macron's dialogue is the potential French role in modernizing India's defense industrial base, though co-development and co-production of weapons. That's never going to happen. 6. The war in Ukraine has given India a rare political incentive to recalibrate its European strategy. 7. Having transformed India's Asian security policies, Modi is well placed to reverse India's long-standing passivity on European security issues. The near-term necessity of working with Europe on the Ukraine question ought to be complemented by the long-term imperative of deeper engagement with European security institutions. These include well-established NATO as well as the emerging European ones like the mechanism for PESCO. Now, this is important. India needs to realign itself with NATO, and there are some moves to do through that. The DefTech high on agenda as PM embarks on France trip. Modi France trip will see special gestures by Macron. UPI launch clean energy on the table during visit. This is the big one. India, France to deepen strategic ties. They did, ready to contribute for peace. Modi tells Macron on Ukraine. That's exactly what Raj Mandla says. But while this is happening, why France is critical is because of its footprint in Africa, Middle East, Indian Ocean. It's allowing India to also, it kind of pulls into what now you're beginning to see Stephen Cook write in the foreign policy press in the US. India has become a Middle Eastern power. It's time to take New Delhi's projection of power in the region seriously, right? This is important. This is written by a foreigner in the United States. Washington is overlooking one of the most interesting geopolitical development in the region in years, the emergence of India as a major player in the Middle East. India's Israel ties are perhaps the most well developed for New Delhi's relations in the region. When it comes to the Gulf, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are aggressively seeking ways to expand relations with India. It is a significant shift because both countries, but particularly the latter, has long aligned with Pakistan. The pivot to India stems in part from a common interest in containing Islamist extremism, but much of the pull is economic. The Emiratis and Saudi see opportunities in a country of 1.4 billion people. So far, the results are positive. In the first 11 months, UAE India's comprehensive economic partnership, which entered into force in 22, non-trade oil between two countries reached 45 billion, which is an almost 7% increase from the previous year. The Indians and Emiratis have also developed their the Indian and Emirati have also developed their ties through what in Washington is called I2U2, a grouping of Israel, India, the UAE, and the United States, which seeks to leverage the combined technology, know-how, and private capital to address alternative energy, agriculture, trade, infrastructure development, and more. For its part, Saudi Arabia, which is India's second largest supplier of oil and gas, wants to augment the energy relationship further by adding renewables into the mix. Finally, there is Egypt, where Modi recently concluded a 2-day visit. By all measures, it was an episode in the ongoing Egyptian-India love fest, coming about 6 months after Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was a guest of honor at the 74th Republic Day parade. The Egyptian authorities, whose economic mismanagement has created a debt crisis and 30% inflation, are seeking help from India. In mid-June, Reuters reported that New Delhi was considering extending a line of credit to Egypt, which would repay its debt in form of fertilizers and natural gas. There's also talk of trade in rupees because of Egyptians are short of dollars, right? The Indian and China, and here you got to get rid of yuanization. You got to get rid of paying Russia in yuan. You can't help China on this at all, right? That's the worst foreign policy move we've ever had. The Indian and Chinese government have a history of enmity, border disputes, and even armed conflict. An addition counterweight to Beijing in the Middle East would be helpful as the Biden administration shifts from de-emphasizing the region to regarding it as an area of opportunity to contain China. And Modi's visit to Washington in late June was also a love fest, including a state dinner and address to joint session of Congress. The US, technically in my view, is playing a huge role in this relationship. I mean, I don't know why he says the US should look at it, and US is, and it has US's blessing. Right? The evolution of India's place in the Middle East reflects the changing international order and the willingness, perhaps even eagerness of countries in the region to benefit from the new multipolarity. If the United States Middle Eastern partners are looking for an alternative to Washington, it is better that New Delhi is among the choices. The United States may no longer be the undisputed big dog in the region, but as long as India expands its presence in the Middle East, neither Russia nor China can assume the role. Folks, this is the important article I wanted to read. And that's why right after France, PM to visit UAE on way back from France trip. And why that's happening, folks, is Raphael. And then a strong partnership to lead the way on border security. This is Israel. As Israel and India complete 30 years of full diplomatic relations, the two countries can jointly lead the way for sustainable development to establish state-of-the-art solutions for the entire world. Together, two nations can generate innovations to benefit the lives of people and change the world for the better. So France actually plays into this ambition of India becoming a big player in the Middle East, just like the I2U2 did. So lots of stuff happening, lots of good moves, but is transfer of technology one of the biggest achievements, and the help from France in developing industrial complex? My doubts, folks, it ain't gonna happen. It's only gonna be signed on a French document which nobody understands. 3 cheers and Jai Hind.